and then the auditors will have some additional review on that before final opinions are drafted, and then we will be delivering that to counterparties and of course presenting to the board as discussed. So that summarizes the kind of progress that we've made and the status of where we are now and the path forward as it relates to the financial audit. So if there are any questions, please let me know.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I would like to first ask the public if we have any public comments on this item for the audit progress report that's just been presented. Board Clerk, is there any public comments?
Yes, Ayla Peters, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Jason, for this presentation. I guess I'm curious, because you mentioned that this audit would be presented to the board. I'm curious if the audit will also be available publicly for the public to read it. I know, like personally for me, and as a customer of Ava Community Energy, and also as part of Local Clean Energy Alliance, I would be personally interested in just reading the audit and understanding sort of that internal work. Yeah, so I'm curious if that will be publicly available or not. And that is my comment / question.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
There are no other members of the public with their hand raised.
Okay, I will return this back to the board members if they have any comments, and I ask the board clerk to help in calling out since I'm not able to see it on my phone right now.
May I just address that question real quick, because I realized that it was my fault in not being more clear on my presentation with that. And that is that when we present to the board, it will be a public document at that time.
Thank you very much for the clarification there. Are there any board members that have any questions on this?
Yes, Member Gonzalez.
Okay, thank you.
So Chair, just a quick question. The statement was that we will deliver to counterparties as opposed to just making it available to counterparties. Do we have some sort of delivery obligation? Or is that just loose language?
That is something that I'll have to look into to see if there's a distinction between delivery and make available. So I would say that, yeah, I can get back to you on that.
Yeah,
I think for clarification, I think a number of our contracts state that we will provide the audit. So I think we generally have a delivery obligation, but that's, it's never really been a problem in the past. But yeah.
I raise it as a question as much as a comment, because to me, once a document is publicly available, they can grab it. And so to create an obligation for ourselves to deliver something that's publicly available just creates this extra risk that I don't see why we want to take on,
Agreed. I think there's some nuance there just on whether we actually, as a courtesy, send it to them versus actually just make it available. Yeah.
And then the other thought here is just a quick comment. And this is, coming from an accounting firm, in my background, I am sensitive to the use of the words that describe an audit. And so whatever the auditors say in their final magic language, I prefer that we stick to that in any sort of presentation that the public can see. So I don't think that they use the word confirm the financial accuracy of. So whatever magic language they use, that we adopt their language. That's just a little pet peeve. But other than that, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Are there any other board members that wish to make comments or clarification?
None in the room and none online.
Okay, so this is a informational item. And so we will move on to the next item, which is item number 5, AVA participation in the hourly flex pricing pilots. And this too is an information item.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Todd Edmister. I'm the director of our policy group here at Ava Community Energy. I'll lay the table a bit for this item and give it some context, and then hand the mic to my colleague, Michael Quiros here, to take you down into the details of it. This is a follow-on to an item that I had presented and the board had voted out back in March of this year. So if you'll recall, then the board voted to approve a load management standards compliance plan for Ava Community Energy. That action in turn was in response to a mandate from the California Energy Commission requiring that all load serving entities, of which Ava is one, prepare and submit to them such a plan. The thrust of the requirement was that all load serving entities provide in some form or fashion a form of real-time pricing. So the idea here is that the time variant rates that essentially generators and the underlying wholesale market provide be flowed through to customers in some form or fashion. The particulars of how we do that were not specified by the California Energy Commission, but instead were left up to load serving entities such as ourselves. The LMS compliance plan was and did reflect our way of moving towards real-time pricing for customers. So back in March, when we put the plan forward, we essentially proposed to participate in a variety of pilot programs. And then based on what we learned from the participation in those pilots, expand or not on the availability of the real-time rates. The contingency was that at least as of March, the exact form of the pilots was still not entirely clear. PG&E, at the behest largely of the Public Utilities Commission, had been moving forward developing pilot programs, but those have not been fully fleshed out. Since then, in the ensuing 6 or so months, PG&E has finalized the form that those plans will take. And so the time has come for us here at Ava to decide whether we wish to participate in those pilots alongside PG&E. As I said, Michael will take you into the details of what that means for us, but we are now putting before you the detailed plan for participating in those pilots. So before we get into the weeds, let me ask if you guys had any questions about sort of the general context or why we're doing this, and then we can move along. All right, hear nothing. My colleague Michael Quiros is here to take you into the wonderful, wacky world of real-time pricing pilots.
What an intro. Could we go to the next slide, please?
Okay.
Thank you. So yeah, as Todd mentioned, we are coming to the board this month looking for approval to participate in what we're calling the hourly flex pricing pilots, also known as hourly pricing, also known as real-time pricing, along PG&E, because the rates that the rates these customers face will deviate from our value proposition. To support that ask, we analyze the financial impacts of what participating is going to cost to Ava or what the benefits might be, because there's sort of an uncertainty around a lot of variables, like how many customers are going to adopt these rates, how much they're going to shift their usage, what the prices are going to be. It's hard to get an exact estimate. So we sort of did a range of scenarios, and those scenarios led us to either realize a net benefit of around $70,000 or a cost of around $150,000. And I'll take you through what variables being what led to those different outcomes soon. Next slide, please. So taking a step back, sort of building off of what Todd was talking about, there were about three main objectives that we are looking at in conjunction with these pilots. As Todd said, the load management standards require CCAs among POUs and IOUs to adopt hourly marginal cost rates and or programs by 2027. Our compliance plan, we basically said, look, we don't have enough information to commit to these rates or to pilots, but we will plan to participate in pilots, try to get more information and inform a more holistic evaluation in the future. We've had some meetings with CEC staff since, And they are pretty convinced that CCA participation in these pilots is important, and that it's sort of a surefire way to ensure compliance in the near term. That's how they would view it. So I think that sort of supports the case here. Another reason, besides just trying to comply and maintain compliance with the load management standards, we want to make sure that we're offering comparable rates to PG&E. If we know of at least one commercial customer who wants to participate in the VGI pilot or vehicle to grid integration, if we do not offer participation in that pilot, in order to receive those rates, the customer would have to opt out and go to PG&E. So we want to make sure we're staying competitive. And the last bullet sort of ties into informing compliance with the load management standards. We generally see this as a learning opportunity, a way to get information about those variables I mentioned. How many people want to adopt these? How do they respond to this granularity of prices? That sort of thing. So, next slide, please. A bit of information on the implementation here. So, for the VGI pilots, that would involve residential and business EV rates, as well as non-residential customers that provide EV charging services. That's to like medium duty, heavy duty vehicle fleets, that sort of thing. That would launch in September. What we're calling the expanded pilots, which are similar in scope, pretty much the same rate design across the expanded pilots and the VGI pilots. Those would launch in November, and that's oriented initially towards C&I and residential customers. In 2026, we would look at expanding the pilots to incorporate agricultural customers. The rates are available right off the bat, but we don't really have any agricultural customers as of yet. So we would wait until once we incorporate San Joaquin County and Stockton to offer that. The billing is kind of interesting here. So we're not fully exposing the customers to real-time pricing and hourly price stream. How this works is customers will, on an annual basis, I'll break it down a little bit here. So every month they're going to be charged on their otherwise applicable tariff or whatever TOU rate they were on previously. Simultaneously, PG&E is issuing this thing called a shadow bill, which shows how they would have performed if they were on an hourly price. We're not paying them that, it's just sort of showing them their performance. At the end of a 12-month cycle, if the customer would have saved money by reducing their usage during times when real-time pricing was high, then they will receive those savings in the form of a bill credit. We're offering bill protection insofar as if a customer would have spent more on real-time pricing, we're not going to charge them back. So they're never going to be paying more than they otherwise would have on their TOU rate. This is sort of only an option for savings on their behalf. We plan to supplement PG&E's marketing efforts with direct outreach to certain C&I customers. It's worth noting that whether or not we plan on participating in these pilots, because there is a transmission and distribution component of these rates, PG&E plans to market to unbundled customers regardless. Next slide, please. Okay, so getting into the weeds of the financial analysis we did that informed those numbers that you saw earlier, there's sort of two main costs and two main benefits at play here. One is, as we just mentioned, the bill credits to customers that are reducing their usage. Another is just administrative staff time and implementation costs working with SMUD to issue those bill credits. On the benefit side of things, the CPUC has authorized a capacity-based incentive to CCAs for participating. That's in the form of $20 per kilowatt year for enrolled customers. There's also, I mean, if our customers are reducing their load during times when prices are high, and then using more when prices are lower, which is the goal of these rates, to shift usage, hopefully we're getting some reduced procurement costs alongside that. As I said earlier, there's uncertainty in how many customers are going to participate. It's very big, worth noting that enrollment is completely voluntary. We're not opting anybody in here. And how customers are going to respond to those hourly price signals. If you go to the next slide, we will show the different scenarios we looked at. So we sort of looked at three different scenarios with different assumptions with regards to how much customers will reduce their usage during peak times. In one of these scenarios, we're assuming customers, in response to real-time pricing, will reduce their peak by about 1% during peak hours. We also looked at 5 and 10%. The hours here that we're looking at are the hours typically when real-time pricing, the hourly price would exceed a time of use rate. That's why we're assuming you're going to see some reduction during those hours. What we are not incorporating here, and what you would probably expect to see in real life, is customers using more during the midday when real-time pricing is cheaper, when there's a lot of solar on the grid. Because of that, what we're trying to represent here is sort of like a worst possible case cost to AVA, without sort of putting an upper band of what we might expect to spend. Okay, so here is a matrix of some different scenarios we looked at. On the left-hand side, you can see we're looking at the same, like I had on the last slide, the 1%, 5%, and the 10% reduction scenarios. We also looked at different sort of, we modeled different levels of adoption of 15, 31, and 62 large commercial industrial customers. The center column there, 31 customers, that's how many customers are currently enrolled in our Building Efficiency Accelerator program. And those are those exact customers. Actually, we use their historic load shapes because we think those sort of large C&I customers who are sensitive to energy programs, who are sensitive to their usage, are probably the most likely to adopt these sorts of rates. And you can see there's a pretty wide range of costs here, anywhere from $7,000 in the lowest cost scenario to about $230,000 in the highest cost scenario. These estimates do not include things like admin and implementation costs, which we're assuming will be around $225,000 over 3 years. Nor do they include the state incentives, which the $20 per kilowatt year capacity incentive I mentioned earlier, which we estimate would be about $300,000 over 3 years. It's worth noting that that $300,000, even incorporating like administrative and implementation costs, would recuperate more than our total costs in some of these scenarios. Any of these below $75,000 essentially. So we'd actually be sort of making money off of these pilots. These figures are not just the bill credits alone. They also incorporate what we estimate to be the reduction in procurement costs. If the customers are reducing their load during peak hours, that's energy saved that we don't need to purchase. So this includes that as well. Some other key assumptions worth calling out. This assumes that AVA participates in customer outreach to C&I customers. The 62 adoption level is pretty high, and we're definitely assuming that we're sort of supplementing PG&E's outreach efforts. And I think that is all I have. Can you go one more slide just to make sure? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Michael, for the presentation, and to Todd as well. And at this time, I will ask the board clerk to see if we have any public comments first.
Yes, Jim Lutz, never mind. Ayla Peters, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Okay, hello, it's me again. Just wanted to go over again, is there a method already available for the public to sign up for this kind of program, or will that be determined later? And that's my question.
Is that a question, how does the customer enroll in the program?
Yeah,
Yeah, we can wait for them to.
Kelly, maybe.
No, Eleanor can go. Go ahead.
Oh, I can address
Can
that,
we
yeah.
respond to that question,
Yeah, so
Michael or Todd?
I can respond to that, Eleanor Smith from AVA. Customers can enroll on the PG&E website into any of these programs. They can self-enroll, or they can enroll through a participating automation service provider or ASP.
Can they do that today?
They can do it once the programs launch in September and November, respectively.
Not for us.
Is there some information as a maybe a part of the meeting that the presentation, maybe there could be another information slide to be provided to be helpful if this is being presented at the board meeting coming up. And maybe just add an additional slide that would be helpful as well. Is that something that could be accommodated?
Sure, yeah, we can add information just about enrollment process and what that looks like timing wise. Yeah, straightforward.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other public speakers?
There are no other members of the public with their hand raised. Actually, there's one now.
Oh.
Jim Lutz, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Yeah, Jim Lutz here. I'm on the Citizens Advisory Committee, but I'm speaking for myself right now. I like this idea. I think it's a good thing. Residential customer participation is my focus. And most of us don't pay much attention to which of our devices are using electricity when. So is that going to be automated somehow? So our, air conditioners don't come on or come on 5 degrees warmer or stuff like that. So that's one question. Another question was, will the shadow bills be available to customers? Will they be able to see how much they spent during the, or saved by changing it? And will there be anything extra or special for extreme peak pricing and participation during extreme peak pricing? I'm thinking about the rolling blackouts from, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. Is there going to be some way for people to get notified of that and so they could participate even more in those cases? That's
Question about bills.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
There are no others. Or Jim Lutz, your hands are still raised. Yeah, I think we're good. All right. There are no other
Okay,
public members with their hand raised.
thank you. To be fair, if there's some additional information that was raised on the automated or monitoring the electrical, I guess, of your devices, is that covered based on the public comment that may be of interest for all of us to understand that part of it? And if someone can answer that question from either Michael or Todd, or I'm sorry, I'm going to need the board clerk to help me, and who else should be able to respond to that for all of us to understand that piece.
Yeah, so I do think the idea is that, as Eleanor mentioned earlier, PG&E is going to be working with automation service providers, which are third-party private companies whose job it is to work with customers who adopt like smart devices to automate those devices according to these prices, which are going to be released 24 hours ahead of time or the day before. So yeah, the idea is that hopefully you aren't, every single hour looking at your fridge, looking at your AC and trying to modulate it. It's sort of set up in advance for you. Customers, including residential customers, will be seeing their shadow bill every month. They're going to see how they are performing relative to real-time pricing. And to your last question about whether there will be some additional notice during like rolling blackouts or extreme pricing events, there's no separate or unique channel of communication with these pilots for those grid stress events. The idea with real-time pricing, I guess, is that hopefully the hourly pricing will be like much higher during those events. And that's how the grid stress will be represented through those higher prices, and your devices will sort of ideally automate accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much for responding to those questions. Turning it to board members, and closing out the public comments. Any board members have any questions or clarifications?
Member Anderson.
Yes. So this is one of those moments where I'm like, oh, I really still am a newbie. Like, so I think I've learned it all, but there's always more to learn. Okay, so how is this different from our current practice with PG&E of energy time of use plans, rate plans? Because this sounds like exactly the same thing to my sophomore ears. So I'm curious how we are going to, number one, what are the differences? And number two, how are we going to communicate those differences to people who already participate in the time of use rate plans?
Yeah, so with time of use rate plans, you have 2 periods. Off peak, I mean, you can have on a basic like residential customer rate. You have 2 periods. There's the peak period from 4 to 9 p.m. where prices are high, and all other hours of the day you have like a different price. And that, like to your point, the idea with implementing those time of use rates was hopefully get customers to use less during the peak periods. Real-time pricing is sort of like the next level, or like several more levels of complexity added onto that, with the goal of getting additional load reduction. Instead of just like 2 or 3 periods, every single hour of the day, the customer has a different energy price, and those prices are supposed to reflect like real-time grid conditions. So if energy is costing more at CAISO, if there's a big demand on the system, ideally the hourly price is going to be higher in that hour, and that encourages customers to modulate their usage in a way that's supposed to be like more efficient for the grid.
One other element I'll just emphasize there is the price. Not only do you have these additional hours versus 2 time of use periods, but the price itself is set in a more dynamic manner for this pilot program. Whereas typical residential time of use programs, that rate is set once a year. It differs seasonally, but it is set with sort of quite a bit of forward look rate settings. So throughout the year, this is my rate, has that certainty. Yeah.
Madam Chair, can I ask another question and make a comment?
Yes, go ahead.
So my next question is, if we're going to get this granular, and people have super smart appliances now for the most part, because it's hard to avoid having smart appliances, are we going to provide an app that allows people to toggle on and toggle off depending on the real-time pricing? Because I could see people getting really into this and really wanting to like monitor, as during their waking hours, their energy usage on an iPad or on a smartphone.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Ava specifically, we're not going to be providing that sort of app or interface. I do think PG&E is going to have some sort of customer interface where customers can see the day ahead prices. I think a lot of the automation service providers, the third party private businesses, a lot of them are doing that sort of thing. Like they have their different apps where customers can like set their preferences for what devices automate how and when, and sort of opt in and out. So I've most commonly seen that sort of thing addressed with those automation service providers rather than the LSC.
I just want to add one point, because we talk about these appliances and it assumes that you purchased them recently, and they tend to be higher end if they're sort of internet enabled, but that doesn't have to be the case. There are actually smart plugs that you plug into the socket and then plug your appliance into it. For example, my refrigerator is on one, and then you connect that plug to your automated service provider and allow them to control the device. And so, for example, my daughter will open my fridge and the light won't go on, and she'll shout out the branded name of the event that has been called, which warms my heart. But you don't have to, own expensive appliances or own your home. You can use these smart plugs and then still participate in this kind of program.
So thank you for that additional explanation. We tried to buy a dumb washer dryer and we couldn't. We couldn't use. You literally could not find one that wasn't connected somehow to the internet. So anyway, and then my comment is maybe for the presentation to the board. I realize this is an informational item, to maybe add that layer of context that we were just talking about, to say, we're all aware there's time of use pricing. that's happening that people, because a lot of people are participating in that, and then say, this isn't the next level, like what you just said, or maybe the next 2 levels of information, because I think that is helpful, just level setting for this conversation. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. Any other board members
Yes, Member Gonzalez.
have questions?
Yes, Chair, I do have a couple of questions here. The price signals out there in the market right now, I have this impression, please disabuse me if I'm wrong, that there's a lot of electricity during the daytime. So let's just start there. Is that factually true? There's like excess supply during the day.
Some days, yeah. Prices tend to be lowest in the middle of the day, particularly in the summer. Sometimes prices are negative even.
Okay. So I'm struggling with this kind of concept of at 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, when we have the absolute highest demand. That's when the price is the lowest.
Generally speaking, but we're in a transitionary phase. So historically, when you look backwards, peak pricing was more in the middle of the day because that was the highest demand.
Exactly.
So when it's the highest demand, power's more expensive, most expensive. Now with more and more zero marginal cost solar energy, that is starting to change. It's in a transitionary phase. It differs day to day for sure. There are days where you have such overproduction of solar that you actually have negative pricing in the middle of the day, and certainly you have days where it's not negative but it's low, and then you still have days where it's still high. So that's where it's really important to have, that visibility into prices, the right price signals, things like that. But we're in a state where things are moving in the direction where middle of the day is lower / maybe potentially negative.
So just in terms of like what we're trying to do to manage people's behavior, what we really want people to do is to take power at 1 o'clock, stick it into a battery, and then turn on that battery power at night, in terms of behavior at the household level.
Generally speaking, yes.
Just
But
conceptually.
Conceptually, but because we're in this transitionary state, you could try to set what is your average and try to get people to change their behavior to what is the average. Time of use is sort of speaks to that, like you said, in these bands, and that reflects the average cost for the year. And then these pilot programs are more dynamic, and day to day they change. And so you want to see if you could incentivize people to either be taking action or having an automated system that actually adjusts that behavior depending on what those price signals actually are. But certainly there's quite a bit of uncertainties to how people react to that, how people are engaged, whether people want to sign up for programs like this.
It's a big picture. I am supportive of this. I think that people should see prices. That doesn't bother me. I just want to just be thinking through unintended consequences over the long run, where people's expectations after many years of training, like run your washer at night. How many in Europe? Run your washer at night. We may be heading towards a place where that's exactly backwards.
We're already there.
Yeah, we're right.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think
Middle of the
that
day.
Yep.
the reason that I bring that up is that I do think there's probably, for those that are in the know, right? There's people that have no idea what their electricity costs or when it costs what, right? But for those that are at least somewhat in the know, it's been beat into them, do your stuff late at night. And in a weird way, if these prices really are accurate, that could actually shock them. Like what's going on here? And I think we need to be thinking about how we talk about that. Because I don't really know what the model is going to show, what the price is, but my intuition says during the day when it's really hot, that's when you need to be consuming electricity, which is backwards from what we've told people. And so how we message, so that's one big topic. The second big topic is just really goes to not understanding this slide, which is slide number, no numbers, 7. Slide number 7. And non-residential customer count 153162. is this only going to be offered to non-residential customers?
Thank you. I actually should have addressed that. So, no, this will be offered to residential customers, to industrial customers. And as in 2026, we plan to offer it to agricultural customers. When doing the financial modeling of what the impacts could be to Ava, we focused on non-residential customers because the financial impact of those customers is much larger. They have much larger loads, and they can modulate those loads to a greater degree. We did look at residential customers and what it would cost if maybe 100, 200 of them adopted, and the results weren't very impactful. So for the sake of simplicity, we just included those larger C&I customers in this slide.
But to that, go ahead.
Oh, and just the reason why Michael's saying maybe 200 residential customers is there's an overall cap for participation in these pilots.
Very useful. If that can be in here
Okay.
when we go to the board, there's no cap. I'll let you guys sort out
Okay, yeah, we'll
what
sort
it
that out,
might
yeah.
be.
It's pilot phase, so we'll speak to the pilot aspects of size.
Right, right, exactly, yeah. So I think the idea of the mass communications, the massive, delta that we might see in the next 3 years in residential customers, it is a smaller pilot.
But understanding the scope of that pilot, again, I think that it's good to experiment and to try and to, if it gives us political capital, that's a good thing, all that. And then the last question, comment, if I understood the words correctly, essentially, people can't lose by participating in the pilot,
Yeah, there's bill protection.
okay? I think we just need to let the public know in some way that in the real world, when this actually gets implemented,
Yep.
you could lose and could lose big potentially. Which goes to, I think, Mr. Lutz's point on there have been extreme price events. And one extreme price event hour or whatever, I'm sure there's some kind of caps, but that one event could wipe out all savings for the entire year, I'm assuming, if you do the math. Just given that's 3 orders of magnitude higher or something like that.
That's a huge component of this being a pilot, so we can assess that, see what that potential loss and risk is, so that if and when you scale a larger program, you are communicating that exact point so customers understand the risks there.
And or we put in collars, right? Like you have price exposure, but it's
Those
only
are all
2x.
exactly, all
or
part of the
3x
rate
or-
design of what we may want to do. at that
Yeah,
point.
Okay.
And I just want to speak to, strangely, we do have something at scale that we've already implemented, but not as volatile, which was the time of use transition. So some customers opted out, but most continued with the transition on the residential side. It was about 350,000, I believe. And I think in the end, it was less than 30,000 who we paid out bill protection to.
Oh, yeah,
Way less.
yes, there's.
But when we did pay the bill protection, we sent customized communications to each individual that got, that the delta was greater than $10. Like you would have ended up paying more than $10
Over the course of 12
over the
months.
course of 12 months. We didn't send it to people who 5 cents, but we let them know, you would have paid more, but you're protected this year. And next year, the delta between the 2 periods is going to be greater. So here are some tips for how to adjust, which I think for this pilot program, we would do the same thing, but it won't be nearly anywhere to the scale that the default transition to our standard time of use rates was, which we did in 2021 and 2022.
That's useful.
That's very helpful. Are there any other members of the board that have questions?
Yes, Member Anderson.
Chair Cox, if I may. I did have a question that was inspired by Director Gonzalez's line of questioning, and that has to do with just kind of accurate data from a pilot program. So because customers can opt into this, and if it's limited on the residential side to 200 customers, I can imagine that you would get 200 highly motivated customers, right? You would get people who are really into this, paying attention, wanting to reduce their electric bill, like really fired up. That is not a representative sample.
For
To Director Gonzalez's point.
Yes.
There are lots of people, unfortunately, who are not paying attention, who are doing their laundry when they feel like doing their
Yeah,
laundry, or,
yep.
you know, maybe they're working during the day and they can't do it, you know, like, so there's all sorts of scenarios. So I'm just curious about the pilot. It sounds like is more for us and for PG&E as an agency than it is necessarily for the, I mean, I'm just curious about that disconnect between the people who self-select into the pilot and then the general, rolling this out in the general way.
I think I'll touch on a little bit of that. So it is a pilot, and as Michael discussed early on, you know, this is sort of in tandem with some CECs, California Energy Commission requirements. And so this is a learning opportunity for PG&E, for the CEC, and for AVA. And we don't know what that future might look like. And that's why this is a 3-year pilot. And so it might turn out that it's like, no, but you know, this doesn't work for this customer group, or it only works for customers that are on one particular rate, or there will be some learnings that'll come out of it, but I guarantee, you know, the rate design hasn't been figured out yet.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like, I
Yeah.
think we understand the limitations of this program and how much we can read from it to understand how it may scale.
Right.
I think one would assume this will probably optimize because it will self-select to a fairly small population that really wants to engage, is going to change their behavior in a way that makes economic sense. And if it works there, at least we know it works there, and then you can think about broader implications. And if it doesn't work there, then you probably have a really big
Right.
problem. Like, even for this small group that really wants to be in it, it didn't quite work. So we're just scratching the surface of this, and that's why it's a pilot. I think I would suspect we will do more pilots in the future to get more information and change the program and try to scale it up and try to target other types of customers and things like that. So this is absolutely just the beginning of this type of evaluative period. But certainly there are limitations to this one.
So if this is successful, maybe phase 2 is a more randomized.
It could be, yeah.
Selection of customers going to them and saying, could you please participate in this?
Yeah.
As opposed to a self-selection. Thank you.
I think, thank you very much, Director Anderson. I think one of the other questions is that I know it's capped for 200, but is there a targeted territory, city, an area like that? Because I couldn't hear if that was spelled out outside of being the residential and then industrial and then later on agricultural, but does it matter where they're located?
I just double checked one of the CPUC's decisions, and I don't believe there is a enrollment cap on residential customers. There's also no to your other question, I don't think there's any geographic like targeting or restrictions on who could enroll. I mean, besides that, this is a PG&E service territory pilot, so all of our service territory should be covered.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay. Well, this is an information item, so we'll be moving on to item number 6, which is the committee members and staff announcements. Anything to be placed on future agenda items? Does anyone have any suggestions or comments?
None in the room.
Okay. Well, at this point, we will be meeting, our next meeting will be on Wednesday, November the 13th at 1 p.m. And I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 1:52 p.m. on Wednesday, September the 11th. Thank you all for attending. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.